Hey everyone, I'm here with Roy Deleon. He's amazing. He's a lieutenant. I'm going to let him give a background on his history just because he's done so much. He's worked as a firefighter, paramedic. So I'd love for you to intro yourself just so you can give a background about yourself.
Sure, Lon. Like I said, Roy Deleon, that's my name. I've been a firefighter paramedic for going on almost 20 years. I'm currently a lieutenant on an engine. We run 3 men on that crew, 3 firefighters. It just happen to be men right now. But yeah, so it's myself, I've got a driver, and then I've got a firefighter. We respond to fire and EMS calls. Primarily, the majority of our calls are, I'd say about 90 to 95% of our calls are EMS related. So they could be on the fire engine, could be on the ambulance, but in most cases, it's always EMS. Started as a volunteer in 1999, did that for a couple of years, put myself through the fire academy, put myself through paramedic school, got hired on, and been doing it ever since.
20 years, 21 years. That's a very long
21
time.
Yeah, technically, yeah, 21, yeah.
So I'm sure you've seen a lot of crazy things and been through a lot of crazy things in that time.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
One of the things I like to do in these interviews is just for civilians who aren't exposed to this kind of thing, if you want to share a story or a couple of stories of some of the things you've had to go through or experience, just so people understand that it's not an easy job, we forget.
Yeah, so there's unfortunately you do see some bad things that you wouldn't see if you had an office job or if you worked at a restaurant or somewhere else. It is kind of some of the things that we do see are sad. I can tell you that when I first became a paramedic, part of the process of making sure that you're ready for the job and making sure you're ready for those calls is being field trained by another paramedic, by a senior paramedic. And so I remember one of the very first calls I had to go on as a paramedic was to a SIDS death. So it was a baby that had passed away, I guess, in the middle of the night. Of course, the call came in, right after shift change. So we had just started our shift. And at the time, of course, I have kids. So that, I think, had an effect on me because, we ran the call. Unfortunately, the baby didn't make it, like I said. I just remember coming back from the hospital, and I stayed in the ambulance. So we get back to the station. I kind of snuck back into the back of the ambulance, and I sat there for almost 2 hours before someone came looking for me. Because these guys, like I said, older guys, they're more tenured. They'd probably seen that a couple of times before. I had never seen that. And I just remember just sitting in the back of the ambulance, not sobbing, but just down, just like, wow, this is what I've got to do. I've got to deal with this kind of stuff. And they finally did come looking for me. And it was one of the senior guys, one of the older guys that just went in there and sat with me and said, "Hey, do you want to talk?" And so we talked for a little bit, and I said, "I'm sorry. I just was thinking about my kids and, thankful that didn't happen to me, but it was tough." There's other calls that involve suicides. That's a big one that we see. And those are unfortunate. That's another one that I can think of where we had to wait for the SWAT team to go in. And we had kind of gotten a little bit of a backstory while we're waiting. We're staged down the street, of course, to keep us safe. And they chose me as the paramedic to go in and assess the patients, which it was a murder-suicide. It was a estranged husband who basically killed his wife and then killed himself. And I just remember going in with the SWAT team, and they gave me a jacket and all that stuff to the bulletproof vest to put on, and we go in and had to go up to the second floor, and I remember they were sitting in an office on one side of a desk, and of course the police are trying to maintain a crime scene basically, and I remember having to crawl across that desk and try to assess these 2 patients without touching anything. And that was pretty tough, knowing that, seeing what he had done to her, because he had tied her up and then did what he did, and then did what he did to himself. And that stuck with me for a long time. That's one of the ones that was 18 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, that's very troubling, that story. It's interesting. You're bringing up a couple of things that kind of touch on the last interview I did. Which is PTSD in the police force. I mean, I imagine this goes across all first responders.
Oh, yeah.
You just mentioned 2 stories. You said in one of them you went by yourself and sat in the back of the ambulance. After this one, you have to deal with it on your own. Is there something in place for you guys that kind of deals with this on a long-term basis? Because 20 years seeing all these things, I would imagine that
Yeah, yeah. So there, I guess so there always has been something there in place. Firefighters didn't want to know about it, and firefighters probably like police officers have this, I'm okay attitude that we have this shell that is too difficult for things to break through to bother us. But we do have critical incident stress management. I guess we have the training, we have the guys that are certified and gals that are certified to come talk to us after an event. So like take that baby story from 20 years ago and fast forward to 2 years ago where we ran a call with another baby where a baby had something happened, not sure what, but we were doing CPR on the baby, got the baby to the hospital. And that was one shift. So remember I said 24 on, 48 off. So the very next shift, I got a phone call actually on one of my days off from one of these critical incident stress management guys who's also a firefighter in the department. And he said, "Hey, Roy, I want to come to the station. We're going to have the guys from the other station come over too. And we're going to just take an hour or two and just talk about that call." And so that's what we did. We, as soon as they showed up, went out of service, those guys came over from the other station and we talked, and it helped. I think it helped me to understand that we all have different calls that we've been on that can affect us differently, or we all have things in our lives that have affected us differently. And it turned out, and I didn't know this, one of the firefighters from the other station had a baby that died. He had a son that had passed away as an infant. And so then to see him operating on that call and see how he was, and I didn't go back to that station after the call because he's at a different station, but it affected him more than it probably affected anybody else because he had had a child die.
Well, I mean, it's nice to see that there's been improvements in terms of just being able to open up about this stuff and talk about this stuff. Like you said, I feel like it's a club where people just want to say I'm okay. And until one or two people open up and say I'm not okay, that I just saw this, this is getting to me. I need a moment.
Yeah.
I need to talk about this. I think that's helpful across the board for all first responders. So I'm glad to see that it's becoming more normalized. You said something interesting also before. You said you went in with SWAT and you went in and you work with police, obviously, in these situations. How have you noticed in terms of just the general atmosphere, the general mood? Has it changed recently because of the rhetoric going on and everything going on with defund the police? And
yeah, most definitely. It's a shame that we have police officers. We have plenty of good police officers, and it's just these very few bad police officers that are putting a poor light on all the good ones to the point that they're afraid to come to work. They don't, they're minimizing their contact with the public. So unless someone is just blatantly just committing a crime that they feel like they need to step in, they're going to turn away. Yeah. And we've seen videos on the internet of police vehicles going by criminal activity. Now, it's not where someone's getting hurt, but it's bad enough that if all this wasn't going on, they would stop. And now they're not stopping. They're rolling by and turning a blind eye to it. You're having police officers that are quitting. Now, this was before all this started, but within the past 3 years, I know 3 police officers personally that have quit being police officers. One went to the mortgage industry. Another one went to real estate. And I think the third one went to the private sector somewhere else. I lost touch with him, but I mean, the stress of that job is making them quit and go somewhere else because they know they're not appreciated, they're underpaid, etc. And the same thing's happening in the fire service, but not to the degree that it's happening in the police service.
No, but I think people don't realize that it does have this compounding effect across all first responders. You can't just target the police, defund the police like they're doing, have this rhetoric, and not have a long-term kind of impact on everything that everyone who works with police. I'm wondering, like, in terms of police stepping down and in terms of you being able to do your job in these situations where it's high stress, where SWAT, like you're saying, these terrible situations where suicide and a murder, homicide, and have you noticed also a change in terms of like you going into work? Has it had any impact on you from that standpoint, or?
I mean, yeah, it has. Well, it has, especially now recently. I can tell you that 20 years ago, when I'd get to the fire station, I always try to get there 30 minutes early. I check my gear out, make sure everything looks good, make sure there's no rips, tears, anything like that. Make sure my boots are good, make sure my helmet's good. Now, that process includes, believe it or not, I have to fit a bulletproof vest, make sure that it's fitted for me, because we have to share it with 2 other shifts, and there's one for each position on the fire truck. And so the guy before me was a little bit taller, maybe a little bit bigger, whatever. So now I've got to adjust that bulletproof vest to make sure it fits me. We also have a helmet, a ballistic helmet that we have to put on. I got to make sure the straps are set up just right for me. And, we had patches made just with the word fire on it, just so that someone sees us in that stuff, they know we're firefighters and not police officers, and hopefully
Wow.
don't try to attack us. But yeah, that's our reality right now, is bunker
That,
gear and a vest.
yeah, that is crazy how much that it's kind of moved forward in that direction. The fact that you have to wear a patch to let people know that you're not a police officer, that you're there as fire, EMT, whatever it may be, so that you don't get attacked, and that you still have to wear a bulletproof vest, shows how extreme the narrative has become. I don't think people realize it. I don't think people out on the street just sitting at home watching this stuff go on realize how much it's become, how far it's actually gone. So I'm really glad that you're actually here to say that, even in your industry. We know it's impacting police. We didn't know it's impacting fire departments, EMTs. Are you, I ask this to everyone, but are you worried about where this is going, and where do you see this going? What's the end result of what you see going on right now?
I mean, yes, I am worried about it. It doesn't stop me from going to work, because that's my job. So I do worry about it. I've always told my guys, we're going to be safe. We're going to do the right thing. If we encounter something where people are becoming violent for whatever reason, we're going to turn the other way, and we're going to let the guys that are supposed to handle that, the police officers, do their job first, and then we'll come in and help. Now, if it was just one police officer and they're being attacked by 1 or 2 people or whatever, and there's 3 of us, you can best believe we're gonna step in and we're gonna help, because that's our brother or our sister that is in trouble, and likewise they would do the same for us, right? But I do worry that it's gonna get worse before it gets better. Now, maybe for certain parts of the country, it may get worse, not necessarily where we're at. But I feel for the firefighters that know that a Wendy's is burning down the street and they can't get anywhere near it, or that a business owner has called and said, my auto shop has been broken into and they have set the place on fire and I've retreated. Please go save my business. And no one shows up.
Well, people don't realize that. It's another thing people don't realize. They think this is just affecting police. But yes, when the Wendy's is burning, it's not just police that can't get there. It's all first responders who can't get there. When a business is burning and there may be a child trapped inside, it's not just police who, as much as people may hate the police, they don't realize you're actually killing people by preventing first responders to getting, and we've heard stories of this. Rape victims, they couldn't get to rape victims. They couldn't get to people stuck in buildings that were on fire. They couldn't get to people who were being unjustly attacked. And so there's this whole other thing going on that no one's acknowledging right now, which is first responders as a whole are being prevented from doing their job. And again, you're just reaffirming this for me, because I've been seeing it going on. I'm like, does no one realize that this is an actual danger to hundreds of people, that this place is on fire and people are just hanging around and not letting first responders in?
Yep, exactly.
Do you foresee a world where many police do? I mean, I personally do, but do you foresee a world where many police just step down? They don't even need defund police to win legislatively. They can win socially, and police just don't do their job anymore.
Yeah, I definitely see it. And I hate to say it, this is my perception though, so this may not be all firefighters, but even before all this started, after the Minneapolis incident, I would say probably it's probably been going on for 2 or 3 or 4 years now. We've seen a decline in the number of people apply for firefighter positions. Wow. So not necessarily my department, but I'm going to give you an example of a neighboring department where they had 6 firefighter openings, and where 10 years ago they would have had 30, 40, 50 guys show up for a test to get one of those 6 spots. They had 6 guys show up. Now, for those 6 guys, they're probably thinking, hey, great, they're hiring 6, we're all going to get hired. Well, 3 of those guys didn't pass the physical agility test that they put on. 2 of them didn't pass the background check. 2 of them decided to drop out or whatever. So that left one or two guys, so they have to hold another test for these 6 positions, and they don't have enough bodies to fill those positions. And so we've just seen that just across the board within our department and other departments, like I said. And I'm sure the same thing has to be happening with the police department. I
Even
don't know
more
if it's
so.
I don't know if it's a generational thing where the kids that are coming up are have no interest in going into public safety.
Well, it's because if you're under 30, you're inundated with anti-first responder messages nowadays. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
across the board, so it's very hard unless, which I've noticed that most police officers, most first responders do, it's like a genuine calling. They don't care. They can be hated and they'll still go do it. Unless you have that. It
Mhm.
used to be that if you're a first responder, you were hailed as a hero. Not that long ago. 9/11, after 9/11, the morale for first responders was through the roof. And we've
Mhm.
quickly forgotten the very things that people do for this country.
Yeah.
Very quickly, to the point of now motivating people to not go into it. And God forbid the world we end up in doesn't have enough people to fill those positions. The people who will have to have in those positions are the people who don't meet the standards. In terms of the response from, and this may be a little bit political, I don't know if you don't want to answer this, I can always just cut it out, but in terms of the response from politicians, the media, corporations, it seems like it's all unified in one direction and one side only.
Mhm.
What's your response to that? Like when you see it, are you like, why is it across the board one position? And are you shocked that no politicians are stepping in and saying something about this stuff?
I mean, I think there are a few that are. Well, I think there's a few that are definitely against defunding the police
Yeah.
or militarizing the police or whatever, and then there are some that are for it. It's I think that too many politicians are trying to be politically correct, if that's even possible.
Mhm.
They're trying to appease the people that are protesting. Uh, let's just be honest. We're not appeasing the rioters. Well, some of them are. I've seen some stories where some people are, or some politicians are. That's ignorant, in my
Yes.
opinion. Um, but to try to appease the protesters, that's one thing. But when you do it in the name of safety, or you forget that you should be doing it in the name of safety, I think that's wrong. I think that public safety comes first, and they're talking about police reform and defunding departments and stuff like that. How about public reform where we tell people to act right? How about when a police officer tells you step out of your vehicle, you step out of your vehicle? And we've got too many people nowadays, especially this younger generation, that feel like the police don't have that authority. They don't have the right to stop them, when in fact they do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they do. And I mean, as long as none of your rights are being violated and they're following procedure, I fully agree with you. And I
Yeah,
think that a lot of people now just have this whole F the police kind of attitude where anything that goes on is a challenge. And I
yeah,
think we've also, which is very, very dangerous, we've taught communities to be very fearful of the police. I was just watching a video. I've gone out and asked people, and I mentioned this in another interview, but I've gone out and asked my friends, how many African Americans, unarmed African American men, do you believe are shot every year by police? The answer is consistently thousands. They believe thousands of people, hundreds
yeah.
of thousands every year. They think it was 10 in 2019, 9 or 10,
Mhm.
according to depending on the study you follow. There's a 1-person variance, so 9 or 10 people were killed unarmed in the African American community by police. It's a very, very small number out of 13 million African
Mhm.
Americans, but we believe, because these stories are so highlighted, they're so perpetuated, that every encounter can kill. And
Mhm.
that increases the likelihood of a negative encounter, obviously, because you're going into a situation and you're freaked out. And there's this YouTube video now where it's these parents telling their kids about police, and the kids are crying and they're like, I don't want to get shot. We're teaching people to be so scared, so
Mhm.
scared. Um, and I have to believe that's for a reason, that there's no positive outcome to that.
Yeah. So basically, like I explained, we have 3 shifts, 24 hours on, 48 hours off. So that's 3 A, B, and C shift. And it's happening. I know it's happening across the country, but you'll have a fire shift at a fire station that one shift is watching Fox News all day long. They're not sitting there watching it all day long. They're doing other stuff too. They're responding to calls and whatnot. But when you walk back into the station, Fox News is on. And then you have another shift that is watching CNN all day long. So remember, with our schedule, at some point, these 2 shifts have to come together. The one that was watching Fox News and the one that was watching CNN. And they're going to come together at 7 a.m. One of them's coming or going, whatever. But if you say one politician's name or one political point of view or something, your opinion about the current state and why it's right or wrong, and then you have an argument. and it's we're not yelling at each other. Of course, everyone's holding a cup of coffee or whatever, but it's happening, and it's got to be happening everywhere. I know it is.
Yeah, so political tension is actually getting so bad that it's even impacting inside, fire stations, inside police departments, even
Oh
within
yeah,
those situations. I mean, that's
yeah,
how divided we are, that even first
yeah.
responders are having
Oh
conflicts.
yeah, yeah, for sure. You're right. It's happening in police stations. I don't see it because I'm not a police officer, but it is happening. I guarantee it.
This has been incredibly enlightening for me. I didn't even realize it got that bad for you guys that you have to put on bulletproof vests. So that's
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah, and we're not definitely not the only ones. It's happening across the country. I think uh, maybe the leaders are trying to keep it a little bit low key so that certain people that are taking advantage of our society right now won't try to hurt firefighters. And that's just my take on it. But it's definitely happening. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, all right. Thank you so much, Roy. I mean, it's been a real pleasure having you on.
It was nice meeting you.
You as well.